Hello, BU alumni, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, From Wantrapreneur to Entrepreneur, Do You Have What It Takes to Chart Your Own Course? My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm an Associate Director in the BU Alumni Relations Office, as well as a proud alum of the BU Graduate School of Management. Today's webinar is sponsored by the BU Alumni Association and is offered to our 300,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, the BU Alumni Association is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. It's important that we get your opinion on how we're doing, so I very much look forward to receiving your feedback via a survey that will be emailed to you later today. We targeted lunchtime on the West Coast today. I know we've got a lot of West Coast alumni joining us from places like San Diego and Los Angeles all the way up to Anchorage, Alaska. We also have international alumni who are joining us from China, Poland, Switzerland, and Serbia. Please, all of you know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If any of you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, I'll ask that you please contact Adobe Connect directly, and I'll give you the phone number to jot down if you want to grab something to write with. Adobe Connect is, their support line is 1-800-422-3623. That number again, 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the BU Alumni Association website, which you can find at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions you might have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A chat box that you should see located at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can during today's webinar. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenter for the day, BU College of Arts and Sciences and College of Communication alumnus Mark Mayette. While at BU, Mark rode crew for 4 years and was awarded the prestigious Scarlet Key when he graduated. Mark went on to get an MBA from Emory University and is now a certified professional in learning and performance as recognized by the Association of Talent Development. Mark's an owner, area developer, and coach for the Entrepreneur's Source, creating trusted, advocacy-based relationships where clients achieve clarity around entrepreneurship. He spent more than 20 years of his career within Fortune 500 companies, but always loved being an advisor, catalyst, coach, connector, influencer, pioneer, stimulator, and teacher. Mark is passionate about giving back. I can speak from firsthand experience. He's passionate about volunteering and doing great things to do his part to leave the world in a better place and helping people see things in themselves or the world that they may not yet see. Mark, thank you again for being here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up your slides, and then the floor will be all yours.
And Jeffrey, thank you very much, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia, so I do not have the opportunity to deal with the snow, as all of us don't generally, because you're on the West Coast, all the snow that Atlanta has received. One thing that Jeff didn't mention is that in my senior year, as evidenced by me liking to give back, I was an RA for an all-male freshman floor in Warren Towers. So very, very memorable event, not only for me, but for the students that I was the RA for. So very memorable. It was a lot of fun. I do want to share with you that one of the reasons why I'm passionate about this subject is that I went through what many of you probably should anticipate going through, which is that you will be hitting a professional fork in the road, potentially, where you are going to need to go a different road, potentially, or assess whether or not you want to continue to go down the road that you currently are. After 24 years in corporate America, I decided to go a slightly different track and was not really sure what that could look like. And fortunately, I was able to get my arms around the fact that I had created a fair amount of professional capital that I could leverage towards something more entrepreneurial, which is really what this presentation is all about. As Jeff indicated, we'll save the last 10 minutes for Q&A. So if you do have questions, by all means, please chime in through the Q&A function. And so let's go for it. What I'd like to do is just first identify who's with us on today's call. And we're going to have a poll that's really going to allow you the opportunity to share what your current state is. Your options are currently employed, not currently employed, have your own business, or none of the above that don't meet any of those categories. If any of those categories, none of the above, make it to that, then type it in the Q&A what the other is, and perhaps, Jeff, you can sound off where appropriate. So we'll just pause here for a few seconds. Okay, so it looks like majority of folks, and it's tight, but the majority of folks are currently employed, and about half that much is currently not employed. 3 have their own business, and 1 is none of the above. So, so this presentation will be helpful because it's not so much a question of if. The question will be is when. You'll need to come to grips with, okay, what's my 2.0? So we'll go to the next slide so you can close the poll. Jeff, thank you very much. And we're going to review some key statistics. So if you're a fan of Caddyshack, I graduated in 1983, so I am being the ball, and you can be the ball with me. If we veer off to the first right, 5.5 is the most recent national statistic or data point for the unemployment rate in the United States. Go up a little further, take another right, 60 million. 60 million is it relates to the predicted number of employees that a Workplace Institute predicted that by 2020 would be 1099 employees. You might notice it yourself. You might have been experiencing it yourself. A lot of companies are going to project-based work, and they're hiring people on a project-based basis, and basically forcing people to become 1099s. 71%, and this number fluctuates, but generally it always hovers around over 70%. That number is illustrates the number of people that are disengaged with in their current role. So disengagement will continue to always be a challenge, conundrum that employees will face. And it's only going to get worse as the economy continues to slowly improve. And this number is not on here, but on a recent article from the Associated Press, they indicated that the number of people quitting their job has jumped 17% over the last 12 months. So prior to that, when we were in our recession/depression, that number fell off dramatically just because it was so hard for people to actually have a job. No one was quitting because a job was better than none. But a high degree of people are still disengaged. 9.9% on the far left is closer to the actual unemployment rate when you take into account the number of people that have given up looking for a job or have decided to take a job that was different than what they're currently doing. So they're in some ways they're doing project work, some ways they're doing 1099, and in others they're underemployed and or just no longer being recorded. So the number is closer to 10%. That's the current state. So as I work with my clients, and my objective when I work with clients is to really give them clarity around whether entrepreneurship is something that would make sense for them. It's all about figuring out your 2.0. It requires a possibilities frame of mind. It requires people to think beyond your current circumstances. And at the end of the day, failure is not an option because as we will continue to live long lives, we will have needs and requirements to be self-sufficient or to earn some degree of income to support ourselves and our family. So failure is not an option. So one of the questions I like to usually ask my clients early on is, if we looked at your life a year from today, what has to have happened during that period, both personally and professionally, for you to be happy with your progress? This is kind of a stake in the ground exercise through that one question, which allows people to begin to think outside of the conventional means to really come to grips with what does life look like, not only professionally, but also personally. So really, we're going down the highway of life, and we have a few lanes that we can get on. One will be we can continue down the road that we've been going on, or we'll be given the opportunity, whether it's we do it ourselves or it might be forced upon us, where we might have to seek a new road or a new lane. And so we'll talk a little bit over the next few slides about what really is going on in the world. And at the highest level, we'll talk about the changes that are happening within business, within our careers, within our families, and then more importantly, we'll reflect on what's evolving within each of us. As it relates to businesses, you can almost put any logo on here. These logos are placeholders, but a day does not go by when a company announces a reorg, a transformation, or in the case of Radio Shack, that they're closing their doors and they're no longer going to be in existence. Ironically, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I put Sears in there intentionally because I've got a 12-year-old son. And so in Georgia, they have a huge building in downtown Atlanta, in the Midtown area, that used to be a Sears warehouse and retail outlet for the Southeast, well over 1.5 million square feet. That building is now being converted into a mixed-use building, but what's still prominently in the side of the building is Sears and Roebuck. So as they're sitting at a light looking straight ahead at the building, I asked my 12-year-old son, you ever heard of Sears and Roebuck? And he said, no, I never heard of them. I said, you know what? In their day, they used to be what Amazon is today. And we can think of numerous companies that if they didn't evolve or the profession or the marketplace change, they will eventually go away. And like I said, businesses are changing every day, and so any logo can be here. The other thing from the corporate perspective, to give you more stats, is that to reinforce the engagement aspect, 65% of people within the corporate world don't feel motivated to achieve the company goals. Only 40% actually trust their company to keep its promises, and only 20% feel empowered to do their best. I heard a stat through Gartner in the last week that indicated that 20%, so in other words, 1 in 5 employees wishes harm on their company. Probably not a healthy attitude. So they might be part of the stats that might be quitting, or it might be best for them to move on. But corporate world is becoming less appealing to a lot of folks. As it relates to what's happening within the economy and what's happening professionally, other numbers that come to mind will be that 6 to 8 job changes within your profession. If you decide to stay in that same profession, you'll have on average 6 to 8 job changes within your lifetime, and then more if you're under 40. And then other folks will completely change your profession at least 3 times. I'm currently on my 3rd career. It's evolved, but I'm at a 3rd level career that's evolved over my lifetime up to this point, and I'm 54. And chances are it'll probably evolve again. 70% of Americans plan to work after retirement. And for some, that's very good because there's many types of businesses and roles that people can have that will keep their mind active, keep them active in their community, and so retirement, all it is a placeholder for when they'll probably want to do something else. I heard an interesting thing today about retirement was that there's three go stages within the retirement phase. There's the go phase where you just retire and you're going, traveling, volunteering, maybe doing a business consulting. And then there's the slow go phase where you start to slow down in retirement, and then there's eventually the no-go phase. So until we get to the no-go phase of our retirement, people will most likely as the stat indicates, will continue to plan to work after retirement. Now let's look at the careers again. Technology is really allowing companies and professions to evolve their professions. If not, they will go away. But think of any profession. and chances are that profession has evolved. Public relations was something I did when I first graduated from Boston University, and public relations has changed dramatically. No longer are we sending mailing press releases. It's all electronic. We didn't have Facebook, didn't have the internet. And then when I was in sales, we actually had to actually knock on doors. Can you believe it? Actually knocking on doors when you're in sales. Um, and then now within the consulting arena, it's not unusual for people to be working out of their homes, or as this slide would indicate, to be in a situation where they are basically an employee or working with numerous bosses, numerous folks that they are reporting to. So it's bringing on a high degree of stress, and I think each of you would probably can relate to the fact that your careers are evolving. The level of stress is only potentially amping up, and maybe one of the reasons why you might be on this webcast. You're thinking in the back of your mind, I'm thinking of my U 2.0. I'm not really sure if it makes sense for me. And if you're feeling it, then that's fine because you're not alone. And to reinforce that, we look at how the workplace has changed from the 70s all the way through even the early 2000s. The workplace has changed dramatically. And it's interesting to think that, when I went to Boston University in 1983, even the college has changed. We had to sign up for the computer lab to get on the mainframe. We actually typed our papers on typewriters. So heaven forbid we had to do reworking of that. And it was just a different period. And technology has had a tremendous impact on how that's evolved. Now there's three specific workforce predictions that are being made. And one of those is that the workforce will continue to evolve from a bring your own worker mindset, from bring your own device, your laptop, your mobile device, to now bring your own worker, where you are hired out on a project basis. The second trend that we're seeing is that the company will become more of a partner, not so much a parent. It's unique to actually find organizations that people will join with the aspiration that they plan on working there for the rest of their lives until they retire. It's very different. The mindset is different. And so examples of how the companies are evolving that relationship: pensions are really unique. Healthcare will continue to become less and less a benefit, and over time it will be probably the responsibility of the employee to figure out how they're going to be paying for their health care. And this is not a political discussion. It's just how things will continue to evolve. And as well as your 401k investment strategies, companies are kind of putting it on the employees' desk to really manage that. Like I said, I live in Atlanta, and I work in a very diverse city, and some major companies are based here. And I have a very good friend that works for a really large company that is literally been there for a fair amount of time. And he's at a point where he's probably within 4 years and so many months and so many days, as he puts it, and one bad meeting away from leaving the company. But he has his stopwatch where his pension, and this is one company that still has a pension because he's been there for as long as he has, that will vest when he hits a certain year. And it's almost like he has a prison sentence, and it's unfortunate that he's actually looking at his role that way. But it is what it is. So the third prediction is that really people are going to really start to look more towards becoming self-sufficient through their own business. Self-sufficiency is very different than self-employment, but when we think of the history of how our economy has evolved, there was a time when we were mainly an agricultural economy, and and a lot of people were self-sufficient, that lived on farms, and they bartered with their neighboring farmers for materials, and they didn't work for somebody else. They were self-sufficient, and they basically existed on their farms. When cities were built and people started to migrate to the city, they left the farm and they got a job and they started working for somebody else. Now, as our economy and the types of businesses continue to evolve, we're seeing more and more of a trend where people will eventually continue to go towards that mode of self-sufficiency by potentially doing something on their own. So what we'll do is we'll go on to the next slide, but first what I want to do to really help us bridge us into the entrepreneurial phase is I want you to take a quiz. And I would like you to answer 10 questions and keep track of how many affirmative answers you provide as I review these questions. So just keep track of it because we'll be polling where you landed. The first question is, can you stomach risk? That's either a yes or a no. Second question, to achieve significant results, are you willing to spend twice as much money and wait 3 times as long as you think you'll have to? It's either a yes or no. 3 is, are you willing to engage in honest work with deep concentration? Number 4, is freedom more important to you than power? Number 5, true or false, with true being the affirmative, you don't rely on praise and security. Number 6, again with true being affirmative, anonymity doesn't bother you. Number 7, are you passionate about your product or service? Number 8, do you analyze before you proceed or just do what seems best? Number 9, do you accept personal responsibility for failure? Number 10, do you persist so long that your friends and family sometimes think that you're unreasonable? So, Jeff, if we can bring up the poll, we'll see where they landed. 3 options, less than 5. Other option is 6 to 8, and C is 9 to 10. Okay. So for those that have voted, thank you very much for casting your votes. A majority of folks are stuck, or not stuck, but are in the middle between 6 and 8. Anything above 6 indicates that you do have entrepreneurial tendencies, motivations, or values. And anything that's a 9 to 10 basically says if you're not already doing something entrepreneurial, then chances are you will be doing it very sooner than later, just because you're of the certain mindset that really tells us that entrepreneurship could very much be in your wheelhouse. So that'll bring us to a definition of entrepreneurship. And for those that are fans of the entourage, I'd be remiss if I didn't share their definition. Entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like most people won't, so that you can spend the rest of your life like most people can't. So let's go to a more traditional definition of entrepreneurship as brought to us by Merriam-Webster Dictionary. An entrepreneur is actually defined as one who organizes, manages, and assumes the risk and rewards of a business or enterprise. And I think this is really where the mindset really needs to come into clearer focus, because when we use the term entrepreneur, people have a certain perception of what that is. One of them is they think of, Stephen Jobs. They think of Bill Gates. They think of people that have started technology-based companies or started companies or started entities and from scratch and built it into this enterprise. If you look at this definition, it really can be any number of people and number of opportunities where it might be as simple as somebody that starts a consulting business out of their house, and it's a legal entity, and they're making money and supplying resources and for their families and being a resource to their community. That's an entrepreneur. So there's many levels to entrepreneurship, which this definition does support. So there's also a book, and many of you have probably heard of this book, but this is one of the classic books within the entrepreneurial space, and especially for someone that is thinking of potentially doing something entrepreneurial. It's a book written by a fellow by the name of Michael Gerber, and his premise is why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. So the E stands for entrepreneur. The basic premise of his book is that too many people start with the best intentions a business, and only to discover within different periods of time that they're focusing too much in the business and not so much on the business, and as a result, they will eventually fail. There are stats that will range anywhere from 75 to over 80% of businesses that start as a startup within 5 years will be out of business. Michael Gerber also supports that data in his book. So the intent of his book is to help would-be entrepreneurs identify what their focus needs to be if they are to be successful in the business. So get it on Amazon, speaking of a company that's current, or get it on a Kindle. It's a really great read. And I'll give you another preview. In the book, he talks about 7 centers of management attention, and we'll talk about each one. At the center, it's all about leadership. And as he defines leadership, it's where you develop your vision for your business. On the exterior side, there's other areas. One of them is marketing, needing to understand your best customers. Who are your customers? What are their needs? Beyond that, it's money, establishing and tracking and maintaining predictable cash flow. No surprise, one of the number one reasons why businesses will eventually go out of business is they run out of capital. And it's too bad because some of the concepts, if they had more time and more capital/resources, could probably survive. But undercapitalization is a major reason why people go under. The next area is management. So management is assembling and motivating the right team, putting the right people on the bus. You might have heard that referred to in the past. The other component is lead generation. How do you attract people to your business, whether it's a business-to-business opportunity or a business-to-consumer opportunity, or if it's a product or it's service. At the end of the day, people need to know about what you provide, and then you need to have a mechanism by which you can attract and generate leads. Then once the leads are generated, you need some sort of mechanism by which you can convert those that are interested or curious about your product or service into somebody that will actually act upon their desire and invest in your product or service. So lead generation, creating a predictable sales system is going to be critical. And then, of course, keeping your customers happy. It's a lot easier to maintain customers than not. An example, it's funny because I was a customer for a particular technology company, and I get their bills monthly, and then I left and went to a different service, and now I get on a weekly basis, please come back, with all different incentives. So I'm thinking if they were a little bit more attentive while I was a client, they wouldn't be having to try to get me back. So client fulfillment's a very important ingredient. Now, at the end of the day, the expectation should be that you don't need to be managing all of those aspects, or all of those aspects in a business might not be core to who you are, might not be a core competence for you. So Michael Gerber asserts that if you don't have those skills, you need to find a resource that will provide you that skill, because any business that will eventually survive and thrive will need these 7 centers of attention and upkeep to be successful. Brings us to our next slide, which is talking about self-sufficiency. 75% of people in the United States have a desire to become self-sufficient. You know, they think of longingly how great it would be not to have to work for somebody else or be in an environment where they control their own destiny. Notice at the bottom, only 5% will actually make it happen. And it's so a lot of people want and a lot of people do, or a lot of people don't, which is why 70% of employees, one of the reasons, 70% of employees are disengaged where they work. They're probably some of the 75% of the people that want to be doing something else that could be self-sufficient. And why is that? What's the number one reason? It's fear, but we like to submit that fear is an acronym for false evidence that appears real. And it is a situation that's not only brought on by ourselves, but by our loved ones. Fear usually only comes up after somebody has experienced something. Just watch your little kid or young children who are experiencing things and experiencing life and learning about stuff. They might not have fear of a stove until one day they put their hand on a hot pot and they realize, wow, when I see steam, it's hot. So now they have some experience that causes some fear or concern about not getting too close to a burning pot. So experience really drives somebody's perception of something. So when you are considering, or if you are considering doing something entrepreneurial, make sure you're on board with your significant others, your loved ones, and you have their support. Because if not, what you may find is that it can be a lonely objective that you will have, especially if you don't have the support of your loved ones understanding what your motivation might be. Now, this slide basically illustrates there's a number of ways, which alludes to the whole concept of entrepreneurship, that you can go down that entrepreneurial road. And this can very well be in parallel, so it doesn't necessarily need to be in serial format. Boston University, a fine institution which we've all attended and we have fond memories of, is a great resource for us to go back to school or to take some classes to develop some additional insights and skills. So one opportunity would be for folks is to go back to school, take some courses, get certified in certain things. Another option would be, going to the right, would be from an entrepreneurial standpoint, will be buy an existing business. It could be a standalone business, could be a family business, could be a business that they really are wanting to get out of, and they have buyers. They actually have businesses that you can look up, and you can actually look if you want to buy them. The other opportunity for entrepreneurship is you can start your own business from scratch. You're going to be building it from the ground, starting it out of the house or the garage, and you're going to go down a particular road. Another opportunity might be to buy a business in a box. This is a box that's templated. Some of that, it's a business model that will either allow somebody to invest in an independent owner-operator license or some sort of franchise model for their particular business. And then the other option will be stay in corporate America. Because at the end of the day, as we've noticed from the previous slide, 75% long to be self-sufficient, 5% will act. And so for those that don't act, staying in corporate America may make sense. But from the standpoint of entrepreneurship, you can either buy an existing business, start your own business, or buy a business in a box. They're all different levels of entrepreneurship represented here. So, and there's broad perspective. So one thing I help with my clients who are trying to figure out what that could look like is that, in addition to the financial assets that you are accumulating through your work history, you're also accumulating a fair amount of professional capital, and that is capital that you can leverage in any number of ways. We saw in a previous slide the 7 centers of excellence here. So you might have an acumen that's more financially based. You might have an acumen that's more management based, building teams. You might be really good in the business development mode or customer service. You might be really good in sales. You might be really good in marketing. There's skills in, of course, at the core of it, you also have demonstrated leadership ability. So depending on what your core competence is, you will have an opportunity to identify how can I leverage those skills into something that will allow me to go in a slightly different road, which this slide is a broad brush representation of all the various types of businesses out there and the categories of businesses out there. And there are some that are not represented on this particular slide, but it gives you an idea that it's vast. So the one thing we usually have people really come to terms with, are they really ready for the next version of themselves in a professional vein? And so the way we get there is we really help our clients really begin to identify themselves, as well as things they're good at, as well as things that they might not be so good at. And so one of the questions we ask is the why question. What is your why? Simon Sinek is a very famous, well-known YouTube evangelist that talks about the why, the importance of why. Apply that to yourself. What is your why? And list your own values. List the values of the organization if you are working or for an organization or people that you work with. Make a list of what those values are. And then ideally determine, are our values aligned? And some of the reasons why people get disengaged, because companies evolve and things evolve, is that their values become misaligned. The next thing we have people try to identify, and this is a simplistic slide, but it still addresses some of the areas that it's going to be important for someone to identify with, which is you need to identify how much income do you really need to be self-sufficient, to support your families, to support your goals in life. What does that look like? $150,000 working for somebody is a lot different than making $150,000 in a self-employed or in a self-sufficient mode. There's a lot of tax advantages to doing your own business, so they're tax efficient ways to write off expenses that normally you don't when you work with somebody else. So part of that adjustment when we work with clients is to help them understand, what does that income target look like in a self-sufficiency role. The other part, which is really critical, is lifestyle. When I left my corporate world, I was working 70, 80 hours a week, traveling 50, 60, 70% of the time. And my lifestyle goals were changing. I had a young family. I did not want to be away for most of their lives. I didn't want to be working most of the week. So my lifestyle goals were such that I wanted to do something that was giving back, being a resource, but at the same time supporting my family, and then being able to be around the family with as simple as driving my kids to school or picking my kids up or going to baseball practice or being there for their plays. For me, it was very, very important. For my clients, we identify, what are your lifestyle goals? How many hours a week ideally would you want to work? And what does that look like, and what do you do for fun? The other two areas are about wealth accumulation. There are ways to accumulate a fair amount of wealth, more so in a self-sufficiency mode, where you can pile a lot of resources into retirement vehicles much faster and a lot more than the traditional corporate accounts that you will have in a traditional 401k or a Roth IRA. It's all about setting up your business in such a way to funnel your profits into it so you accumulate wealth. The other is equity. Some people have goals about, they want to create a business that eventually will be worth something to someone down the road, whether it's to a family member or to someone else that looks at their business model and says, you know what, I would like to buy your business. And there are some businesses that allow you to create equity better than others. And we could talk about what that could look like if we've got time at the end. But these are the four areas, though, that we also like to have people begin to identify with as they really discern what their options are. The next is really beginning to understand what your transferable skills are. And then during that self-assessment, identify with your skills, identify your values, identify what you like to do, identify what your motivations are, what motivates you, what your needs are. And then on the outside, you get the more global perspective about, what are your financial responsibilities? What are your goals and priorities? What about your health? How will you maintain your health? What do you do for fun? The spiritual side is something that for many is very, very important. More balanced life through that as well. And then also the personal relationships. What do you want to have? What does life look like? So part of the assessment that it's important for people to really address include buckets in each one of these areas. The other is also identifying, how are you wired? Everybody has different behavioral styles, and part of that is reflected in what's referred to as a survey called DISC. And the first one, and DISC is a personal assessment tool used to improve work productivity and teamwork. But it's a way that, and many of you probably have already had a DISC assessment done. The D of DISC stands for dominance. So listen, I'm going to describe each of these, and then I'll ask you to share with me what you perceive to be your primary attribute, either D, I, S, or C. So the D, dominant, is a person who places emphasis on accomplishing results, the bottom line, they're confident, they see the big picture. The drawback to the same individual and same wiring is this person can also be very blunt. They accept challenges and they get straight to the point. Happy talk and talking about ball games and things like that are really not in this person's DNA. The second type is referred to as influence, and this is someone who places emphasis on influencing or persuading others. They are the life of the party. They're open. They have a lot of relationships. They love to meet people. There's no such thing as a stranger. And they also love to collaborate. And what they dislike more than anything else is being ignored or not being recognized. The next attribute is referred to as the S stands for steady. And this is a person who places emphasis on cooperation, playing nice in the sandbox, sincerity, dependability. This person also doesn't like to be rushed. They have a very calm manner, calm approach. They're supportive. They're very humble, and generally they have a smaller network of associates or friends that they know very, very well. They don't know everybody, but they just have a small network. The last is referred to as conscientious, or the C. And this person places emphasis on quality, accuracy, expertise, competence. They enjoy interdependence. They like their independence. They also love to analyze data. They love details. And the flip side is they really do not like being wrong. And they sometimes fear being wrong. That's why they like to analyze stuff. They don't want to make any mistakes. So based on that, Jeff, if you can bring up the poll, I'd be curious to see where people land here. Oh, you know what? We missed a poll. So that's okay. We'll go back to that one if we have time. But if we can go to the dominance one, to the DISC one, let us know where you've landed. Okay. And this is interesting. Keep responding. It's interesting because yesterday we had the same thing, which is supportive of how you're wired. Remember we were talking about the C? C loves to gather information. They love to learn stuff. They love to analyze it. Guess what we're doing on this? We're educating. So the fact that most of the people that have responded to this view themselves as conscientious, this is part of how you're wired. This will help you really begin your journey if you choose to go down that road, figure out if this is something you want to continue to investigate. So no surprise that conscientious was the highest one, at least for this one. It was the same yesterday as well, by the way. So that's something for marketing purposes, Jeff, that you're going to get all the C's. The opportunity to be, how do we get the D's and the I's on there as well? And I know we have a couple on here, several on here, but for what it's worth. There's other assessments that are now coming online that are very reliable assessment tools. And this is one that is coming out of the Gallup organization. If you're familiar with an assessment called Strength Finders, Gallup is a group that has created and developed the Strength Finders assessment. Over 11.5 million people have taken that assessment. Earlier or late last year, they launched this assessment, which is referred to as a entrepreneurial profile assessment. They took the data from all the number of people that were going through their strength finders, stripped out the high performers, entrepreneur types from the database, and they created an assessment to gauge people's entrepreneurial attributes that they possess. Their premise is that by 14 years of age, your entrepreneurial DNA is set. And so the opportunity you have during this type of assessment is to identify with what are the, based on the top 10, or the 10 attributes that Gallup had arrived at that entrepreneurs generally possess or you need to possess, where do you land? And there are three ways that you will land on these 10. One is that you'll have attributes that are dominant, which are represented by the gold. And then you'll have attributes that are what they refer to as contributing. So you can do it, you can focus on it, but if you had to, you can do it, but it requires some focus and concentration. And then they also have something that's the opposite of dominant. They're politically correct. They call it supporting. I think it's really, if you think about the opposite of dominant, it's weak. And so this report will actually illustrate or tell you which attributes from an entrepreneurial standpoint you have that are dominant, contributing, or in their words, supporting. The average American has 2 attributes that are dominant. The average Inc. 500 executive has 5 attributes that are dominant. So depending on where you land here, that's also a good indicator in regard to what type of entrepreneurial endeavor would seem to be best suited for you personally. If you end up doing this type of assessment, you have 6 or 7 that are dominant, then entrepreneurship is definitely in your wheelhouse. If you have more of like 3 dominant aspects, your opportunity would be, can I still do something entrepreneurial, but can I do it in such a way that I can lean in on a current system or lean in on a process that will allow me to be successful? Or will I have resources that will allow me to be successful in my endeavor? So this is another example of what you can discern to determine where you are from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And then once you identify that, is identify what you're best at, what your core skills are, be aware, and then ideally, if you're thinking of doing something entrepreneurial, what can you delegate that's not core to who you are? And so it's akin to the 7 Myths book that I referred to by Michael Gerber, where you identify what your core competence is. And let's bring up that last poll, Jeff, the one that talks about the where they landed of the 7 attributes that Michael Gerber talked about, because this is a good thing. I'd be curious to see what you believe to be your number 1 competence to be. So take a minute or two to respond. And there's one more. You might need to expand this a little bit. There we go. So as you're voting, keep the poll open, Jeff, if you can. So to support this slide that we were just on, if you've identified that your core attribute is leadership or marketing or client fulfillment, then you'll need to look at what am I not, what's not core to me, and how can I serve that function in any business or enterprise that I might decide I want to go down. What resources will I have to have in place to make sure that that aspect of the business is being met? So, all right. So good job, everybody. And not one person has indicated lead generation. See, because all those salespeople that are all high eyes are not on this notice. No, there weren't a lot of high eyes on this call. So that explains why no one has lead generation as their number 1 attribute. They're all out networking or something. So you can close the poll, Jeff. And then we'll just go to the next slide. So in regard to resources, and we're wrapping this up, the one thing I'd like to share with you is that, again, my motivation is to give people clarity as to whether entrepreneurship is an option for them based on what you've done up to this point. Along those lines, there is the assessment that I shared with you that's through Gallup, that if you choose to, I'll be happy to subsidize your taking the assessment and basically discount the assessment by 30%. It's only a few dollars. Be aware that if you decide you want to take advantage of this, you'll get to this registration page, and then when you register, I will send you separately an email with instructions for how to do the assessment. So again, if you do decide to register for that and take advantage, I will send you a separate email once I'm alerted once you do that. I'll send you a separate email with instructions. And the other one will be eventually you need to meet with an accountant. Another person you'll need to meet with is an attorney, and then SCORE. And this is a group of retired executives that basically are in every major city. So look up score.org if you have a business idea or plan. They're a resource for you to help you figure out how to make sense of your business and how to get it up off the ground through consultation. They provide that free service. And then your local economic development office is also a great resource as well. So I'm going to pause here, Jeff. I know that we have about 9 minutes, maybe less than that, for some Q&A. So Jeff, I'm going to pause if there's any questions that came up.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mark. For all of our guests, again, now is the chance to ask your burning questions about entrepreneurship by using the Q&A chat box you should see at the bottom of your screen. And I'm actually making it a little bit larger so I can see some of the questions. A note about questions, if you could try to keep them short to maybe just 1 or 2 sentences, that's always helpful. Mike has chatted in with a question or two. Mike, thanks for keeping yours short. Mike's first question, Mark, is earlier on in your presentation, you were talking about just the general business failure rate. And Mike is wondering if those statistics about the rate of business failure includes, some individual who starts their own company, whether they're a plumber or, a tradesman, those kinds of businesses.
Yes. Yeah, it's all businesses that are registered to their Secretary of State, which will include everything from plumbers to tradesmen to big corporate entities.
Great. Mike is also wondering if you could share your thoughts about what he's described as the Silicon Valley 3 to 5 year IPO model in terms of entrepreneurship models.
Yeah. Well, and talk about failure rates, because that's I'm in Georgia, Atlanta. Georgia Tech has an incubator for their students. I talked to the person that runs the Entrepreneurial Institute, and he said their failure rate is about 80% for students that start a business, and they like that because people, not to say they have a 80% failure rate, but you learn through experiences. That IPO 3-year, 2-year, let's create a business model and let's build it up. And I think the days of the internet where you put .com behind your name and it was valued at $1 billion are gone. But there are some technologies that are coming online that are making VCs and looking at doing a quick splash and then cashing out somewhat more attractive these days, but it's wrought with peril. So we could probably spend an entire webcast actually talking about just that. But it seems to be coming back in vogue, but not as it was during the internet boom.
Great, thanks. Mark with a C has a question for you, Mark with a K. Any ideas about sharing business ideas with others and the role of non-disclosure / confidentiality agreements?
Or if it's in, and let me just interpret that question. So if you've got an idea and how to protect your idea through NDAs, then they are enforceable. So if as long as you have an attorney, just do a quick review of the NDA that you are wanting someone to sign. They are enforceable, especially if you have is very specific and it's documented. So, but that's where the attorney comes in from the previous slide.
Great, we got a bunch of questions rolling in here. Alexandra has chatted in with her question. Is it possible, this is in regards to the assessment offer that you've made, Mark, with the 30% discount for BU alumni. Possible that somebody could sign up for another session if they're not able to make the one that's scheduled for that date?
Well, the assessment itself, the dates, you'll see date ranges in there. Don't worry about that, because that's just keeping that registration page open until the end of the year. So you can, if you want to do the assessment, just sign up and you'll be fine.
Gotcha. Sherry's got a question. Any advice for someone wanting to start an online international business? Even figuring out which country to register in is not easy.
That's where I think if you've got an idea and you've got a concept, being a BU alum also, I would imagine you will have access to resources to help you through that. Remember that organization SCORE that I mentioned? They could be providing some insight as well. But I can't provide specific insight about starting an internet business and which country that it seems to make sense of. That again is going to become probably more of a detailed discussion that will require a lot more information. But seek out some of the, like SCORE. Seek out a local economic development office. If you get a technology group in your area, network, talk, kibitz, and connect that way.
Great, we got two more interesting questions that I think we can get to before the hour is up. Daphne has asked, how old is too old to be an entrepreneur? Younger folks have more time to rebound after a failure. Older folks, not so much.
It's a very relevant question, and I think what we're seeing is that people I'm 54, and like I said, the studies indicate that people will want to continue to work well through and during their retirement. The great thing that the 50-somethings, 60-somethings have is context. They also have perspective. So never underestimate the power and professional capital that you amass. So there's no, think about it. Ray Kroc started McDonald's when he was 53, and then you'll have Colonel Sanders. There are two food options, but they come to mind immediately. He was in his 60s when he started Kentucky Fried. So don't underestimate the power of experience and professional capital.
Great. And then Mike has asked a question that was intriguing to me. His question is, how do you value a sense of where we are in history? What he's getting at is that he feels like trying to start something like Ford Motor Company in 2015 is obviously not as plausible now as it was back, in the early part of the 1900s. And Mark, before you answer that, I would throw out, when you look at something like the Tesla car company that started, people are doing it. But what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think it's your response is spot on. I was thinking of Tesla when you brought up the example of Ford. I think the economies are different. The type of technology, the traditional way of us thinking about things, and are definitely evolving. But as long as there's a need for a product or a service, it can be worldwide. We now have a worldwide economy. We're not just talking about the United States and the impact that the U.S. will have. We have companies in China that are just chomping to get into the United States with all sorts of car models that we haven't seen or heard about yet. But wait, they're coming. So it's still a very much a viable opportunity. So it's if you've got a good idea, you serve a good need, you have a really good strong value prop, anything's possible.
Mark, we're running right up against the hour here. Thank you again for the time that you've contributed to BU Alumni. This is, as you mentioned, the second time this week that you've done this presentation. You've been able to have a great impact on over 100 alumni all over the world here. So thank you again. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, and I'd be happy to connect with anybody via LinkedIn if you choose to continue the dialogue or the connection. It's absolutely my pleasure. Go BU!
Great. And my thanks also go out to everybody for participating. I hope you'll plan to join us for our next webinar in April. On April 22nd, we've got a great session called The Art of the Elevator Pitch, How to Rise to the Top and Not Get Stopped. Spots for that session are actually filling up rather quickly, even though we haven't done much to promote it yet. So I'd encourage everybody who's interested to sign up now, and you can do that on our website at bu.edu/alumni. And as always, if you or any BU alumni you know would be interested in presenting a webinar just like this, as Mark did, for the greater benefit of the BU alumni around the world, feel free to contact me in the Alumni Relations Office or by email at J as in Jeff, T as in Thomas Murphy. That's jtmurphy@bu.edu. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I selfishly want to give a shout out to my old friend Sean, who's joining us, who I haven't spoken to in quite some time. Sean, thanks for tuning in, and have a great day or a great evening, all of you, wherever you might be.